Welcome to the Brigham Young University Family History Library webinar series. My name is Sean Firmage. I will be your host for this webinar. Just a couple reminders for those of you joining us live. We do have a couple polls down at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to let us know if there's any topics that you're interested in hearing in the next month or so. We'd love to hear your feedback, and also let us know how you heard about us today. And then at the end of the webinar, there will also be a separate poll if you want to go ahead and participate in that as well. Our next webinar will be Thursday. It will also be James Tanner, and he's going to be covering record hints and how to use them by, and that's also at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, if you'd like to join us for that one. Today we will be pleased to hear from James Tanner, who will be giving a presentation titled Digging Deeper into Google for Genealogists. James has a bachelor's in Spanish and a master's in linguistics from the University of Utah. He received a Juris Doctor degree in law from Arizona State University. He worked for 39 years as an Arizona trial attorney. He previously owned a retail computer business and an Apple Macintosh software company. James has over 35 years of experience in genealogical research and is a blogger for Genealogy Star and the blog Rejoice and Be Exceedingly Glad. He served for 10 years as a missionary at the Mesa, Arizona Family Search Library and is currently serving at the BYU Family History Library. He is the co-author or author of over 25 books on genealogical research. He has presented at expos and conferences around the U.S. and Canada. James has 7 children and 33 grandchildren. All right, James, I'll turn the time over to you.
Howdy, this is James Tanner. We're here for another BYU Family History Library webinar, and to remind everyone that these webinars are recorded and put up on the BYU Family History Library YouTube channel. We also invite you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. This particular webinar, Digging Deeper into Google for Genealogists, was previously started in another webinar event. And unfortunately, we had a fire alarm test at the library, and we were all asked to leave. So that one ended precipitously, and we did not finish it. So we're going to go back and redo it. So some of it might be a little bit repetitious if you were here before, but I generally can't remember what I said previously, so it'll be different, I'm sure. So one thing we have to understand is that Google does a lot more than search for names. I do suggest that anytime you have a subject being the name of an ancestor with all of the variations, nicknames, or anything else that could occur, as well as the places where your ancestors lived, that you take the time to do a Google search. It's important to understand that these Google searches are probably going to turn up things that you would not otherwise take an opportunity to look for. This is something that extends throughout all of the different websites that have material on some kind of historical material. It's always a good idea if you come to a website like archive.org or that has a lot of digitized material to do searches for your ancestral, at least your ancestral surnames, just to see if there are any kind of materials that might be of interest. And once in a while you hit the jackpot and find something that's really helpful. But in this particular presentation, what we're going to do is talk a lot more about Google than just doing searches with the Google search. First of all, you can create a research trail, and that happens with any kind of an online database such as Ancestry.com. Now, what I mean by a research trail is that you use the information that you obtain from one search in making a second search or subsequent searches. So you basically can create a way to dig deeper into the information that is being supplied by any one of the websites. You can do a research trail in one website, or you can do it across the internet. And in this case, I'm going to use an example by starting with an ancestry search and then continuing with a Google search. So here on Ancestry, I'm going to look for one of my ancestors, Henry Martin Tanner, who is my great-grandfather. And when I do that, I put in a qualifier. He lived in Arizona. And here's some information that was generated by his search. And in this case, they found a death certificate from Arizona Death Records, 1887 to 1960. Well, that gives us a lead on that particular item. And also on the right-hand side of the screen on Ancestry, you get a whole list of other items that they found for the same person. Oh, they do a pretty good job. Occasionally they're off base, they have the wrong person, but it's very helpful to use those records. Their accuracy there is a little bit more expansive than it is when you do just a general search, as what I started with. And now what we're going to do is copy the name of the collection and paste it into a Google search. So the collection that came up was Arizona Death Records, 1887 to 1960. Well, you might say, well, I already looked at that because that was what was on Google, what was on Ancestry. But in reality, what we're doing here is we're creating a new search term. We're creating a search term called Arizona Death Records, 1887 to 1960. And I'm going to use that to do a search on Google. And that search on Google then gives me a way. First of all, I have to examine all of the results for similar websites. And now what I have is perhaps, depending on the types of websites that are ultimately available, obviously, but in this case, what I have is a list of places on the internet that have Arizona death records and or genealogy about Arizona, where I can then go and do additional searches for my great-grandfather, Henry Martin Tanner. So now I come up with a website called arizona.gov.az.gov, excuse me, Arizona genealogy.az.gov. And this particular website has the actual death certificate for my grandfather, and for a lot of other people born who are relatives who were born during the time period covered by that particular website. So we have now more information than we had before. Now we're going to look at this particular record, and from that record, we all of the items here on this particular death certificate, in this case, become search terms for new information that can be found in Google. Now, this kind of a search can be used in any subject, whether it was genealogy or some other subject that you were researching, but it's particularly useful for genealogy because it leads us to records of which we probably were not aware of when we started the search. In this case, now we have his name of his father, Sidney Tanner, and his mother, Julia Shepard, and his birthplace is unknown, but for the mother, and the father's birthplace is in New York. So I can now use, oh, by the way, that points something out on that little record there that we just brought up, and that is that they misspelled California, but that's okay. Just remember to make the correct spellings when you translate what's on the records. Now, I'm using Sidney Tanner, and I'm using San Bernardino as a search term because that was associated with Sidney Tanner, and that keeps the trail going. Now, in this case, we find Sidney Tanner in a lot of different places. We find him in a family search. We find ancestor files biography, and we find him even under the city of San Bernardino. So there's just interest. It's interesting where you might find some information about your grandfather. This happens to be Henry Martin Tanner's father, or my great-great-grandfather. So here's one in the ancestor files, and in this case we find a biography of Sidney Tanner. And I have to admit, I knew about this one in advance because this happens to be my daughter's blog. But if you were not familiar with this, it would be a very interesting place to find. Primarily because as an historian and as a very good writer, my daughter has included biographies, all of which, and all of the entries of which she's put in here, letters and stories and all sorts of information about her ancestors, which include my ancestors and my wife's ancestors. And in this website, she has meticulously documented every fact, so she has references out to additional places that you can go to search. So in each of these cases, the additional incremental searches that we're making in Google allow us to generate additional search terms that will help us to do further investigation into our family. We can, in our selection of search terms, we might add additional information to an individual, but in this case, we're actually adding information to an entire family. So we keep following that trail, the searching trail that we've created. So we've put in a search entry into a program such as Ancestry, Family Search, MyHeritage. We came up with a record for an individual. We used the name of the collection of that record for further searches, and then turned up more information about the family in the subsequent websites. Using that information, we found even more information. And technically, with a research trail like this, there's using a little bit of imagination and using a little bit of innovative ideas as you get new websites, you'll find that you can keep this going for quite some time and gain a considerable amount of information about either one ancestor or your entire family. But here's the key to this. Don't forget to save the website information and add the documents found to your family tree, because it's important that you, as you work through this reference, that each of the steps that you find, that you add those records directly to the family tree. Now, if you've already done this, in other words, if that particular website, you've already started with that website, then choose a different one. Find a different record with a different starting point on Google. You're probably going to find a completely different trail. And keep looking for additional record titles. What we're using here is not repeating the name search until we get a new record set. Once we have a new set of records for that subject, then the name, we do a search in that record set for the ancestors that we're looking for. So when I found Arizona deaths, and I went to the Arizona State genealogy.gov.az.gov website, then I used that website to find additional ancestors, add their records to my family tree, and then I could move on with terms that were presented in the documents themselves. In this case, I adopted the name of an ancestor, Sidney Tanner. So this is basically the way that we follow to get additional information out on any particular subject off of using Google searches. And any of the names that you find, add those to the list of names to search for and start the process. So now, for example, I could go back, if this were the first time that I had found the name of Sidney Tanner, I could go back and add Sidney Tanner to my family tree on the program, and then use that information to do additional searches and find additional records. So this kind of keeps the whole research process rolling online. So you're no longer without anything. When you're sitting there thinking, now what should I look for? Then you already have suggestions, and your suggestions give you, from the results of your searches, give you an idea of whether you're on base or off base. One thing you do have to remember is that if you come up with kind of negative results, no results at all, either you've badly mistyped or misspelled the words, or the subject you've come to the end of that particular trail, so you just go back and start with a new trail in a new program. Okay, so now let's suppose that I'm doing real great finding information, but my ancestors all of a sudden seem to be coming from a different country. My ancestors go way back in England, Scotland, and Wales, and in the United States, and back in the colonial part of the country, back into the 1600s. So I don't hit foreign languages very early, but I do have two Danish lines. So those get back about 3 generations back, end up in Denmark. But what if I wanted to search in one of those other languages? I can use a program that's on Google that's free, that's called Google Translate. I guess that's an important thing to note here, is that everything I talk about today is free. It's part of Google's translation, but I mean part of Google's online free programs, but understanding the fact that nothing on Google is really free, because Google is a overwhelmingly large, one of the largest advertising company in the world. And so what you're seeing actually is a lot of advertising, even if you don't understand that you're advertising. And even if it's only advertising for Google itself, but it is all Google-based advertising. So now we're going to use a program called Translate. This has over 60 languages, and will translate from any one of those languages to one of the other languages. And obviously, if we're English-speaking people, we'll want to translate our English words into foreign words. Okay, so the first thing I can use is, what I do is think of a search term in my language. So what would I be searching for in the target language? In this case, I'd like to look for parish registers online. So I want to know where the parish registers are and whether they have any of the parish registers online. Now, what I'm referring to here, obviously, is the Catholic Church's parish registers, but there are others. There's the Lutheran Church has parishes. Some of the other large denominations in Europe have parishes, and in the United States. So I just want to find parish registers online in a particular language. In this case, I'm going to translate that term into the target language, whatever it is that I've chosen. So in this case, I'm translating that into Italian. So I want to know if there are any websites out there that have parish registers online in Italy in Italian. Well, they don't have to be in Italy. They're wherever they might be, but in the Italian language, which would probably give me parish registers in Italy. So now I'm going to copy that translated test, the Registri Parrocchiali Online, however you say online in Italian, and probably online. And we would then go back to Google and search for the translated text. So now I've got my search terms that I would have put in English, and I would have gotten English responses. Now I've got an Italian search term in Italian asking for Italian parish registers, and I'm going to search for that. And what I get is a list of websites in Italian that deal with having parish registers online. And this first one up here has a link that says translate this page into English. Now this is a setting that you can go into your Google settings, or well, actually Chrome settings, and specify if you want to have them translate every page that's not English. So you put in your main language, whatever that is, English, Spanish, German, and then the target language, and then they would basically ask you if you want to translate the pages into your language, into English. In this case, it comes up with a link that says you can translate this search page into English. So I can click that. Now we can enjoy the results, because what we've done is we have done searching for specific genealogical information in Italy, in Italian, using Google, and we get the results. When we get the results, here's a program called Parish Registrations Online, or Parish Information Online, and this is an Italian website that gives you the ability to search all the parish registers, well, significant number of parish registers in Italy online historically. So, perhaps if you've been doing Italian research, you've been trying to figure out how to get into looking at the Italian or German or French or Danish or whatever other language out there. And here you are doing research in Italian in Italy. So one of the things that I kind of point out with doing research online using Google or using the tools that are basically part of Google and part of the computer itself is that there's really no need for fancy formulas or symbols or tricks. There's a lot of information out there online and presented in conferences about searches in Google um, that makes it sound like you have to memorize all this huge long list of different tricks and little things that you use. In fact, a lot of people have are basically people who have a programming background or very high tech or technical background try to tell you that you may need to even learn how to use Boolean algebra, which is applicable primarily to set theory and other kinds of mathematical types of pursuits. My answer is, yeah, you can use all that. Google recognizes all those kinds of things, but there's really no need to do that. By the time you've constructed your fancy formula or whatever it is, I've already found the subject 5 times. So you just basically do searches. My idea on using Google is just use the program. Just keep doing searches. Now there's a couple of things out there that you can do to make your life a little easier, and they're not tricks and they're not special symbols, but they do communicate with Google a little bit. One of them is for searching for names. You may want to put the names you're searching for or the phrases you're searching for in quotation marks. If you do that, what you're telling Google is you want exactly that name and not each of the individual words. Google will assume you want the whole phrase or the whole sentence, but if you want to force that issue, then or add other words that you don't that don't fit into that phrase. So, for example, if I was searching for Henry Martin Tanner in Arizona, I would put Henry Martin Tanner in quotation marks, but leave Arizona out of the quotation marks. If I put Arizona in the quotation marks, it would look for Henry Martin Tanner, Arizona, period. And of course, I may not find that. That may not exist anyplace. Okay, so let's go back to the translate program. Let's suppose you need to translate in a non-Roman alphabet. Okay, what's non-Roman alphabet? Hebrew, Russian, um, any Indonesian languages, Chinese, Japanese, anything like that. Okay, so Arabic. Okay, you've got all sorts of languages out there, and if you need to do research in those languages, then you can do the same thing. So basically, I'm going to use Hebrew as an example. Let's say I'm researching out there and I want to search something in Hebrew. So I can type the term in English, but if I want to do the search in Hebrew and do the typing in Hebrew, so let's say I have a word that's on the screen, it's in Hebrew, I've done some research, I found it, and it's on an image, for example, that I can't translate, then I can use down here in the corner there's a little character that allows one of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet that allows you to select a either a keyboard or a handwritten or handwritten in Hebrew. So here what I do is click on the keyboard, and now I have a Hebrew keyboard, which also, by the way, types from right to left instead of from left to right. So we have, it switches around. So now I have a way of transcribing a word that I find in Hebrew and using Google Translate to translate that word into English, even if it was in handwriting or on a sign or on a image somewhere that was not read as a text file. So now if I type that in, for example, then I can have that as a search term that I can use. Now, here's the basic question that comes up when we're talking about doing searches, and that's how do you think of the terms to search. I've shown you one way to go through that, and now I've given you two ways. One is to look for your search terms in the foreign language, and the other was the first example, which was use a search in a genealogy program to create search terms based on new names or based on the names of collections or documents that are created from your searches. So now we're going to go into some other ideas. So it may seem obvious, but think of the most obvious description of the subject. So what was the most obvious description that I could think of my great-grandfather, Henry Martin Tanner? It would be that he lived in Arizona. So that's a search term. I can use that in conjunction with Henry Martin Tanner to find the Henry Martin Tanner who lived in Arizona. If he was a rancher or and whatever the occupation the person was, or anything that might be a distinguishing feature to distinguish that person from some other person, that helps you get a more focused search rather than 10 million results in 0.5 seconds of stuff that you can't use or don't even care about. So if you just kind of think of associations, if you're looking for somebody who lived in England, England's the search term. So if you're looking for somebody who lived in Cheshire, England, then that's search term. So you've got all sorts of things out there. And then, as I said earlier, use those results. Once you've got those searches, use the results of your searches to suggest more search terms. So the way I do searches is I try to think of what someone would put on a website about my ancestor. And for example, going back, and I hate to keep using this, though I actually do, because I don't actually like to keep using Henry Martin Tanner because it's a good subject, typical kind of subject with a lot of different search capabilities. So one of the searches I could make with Henry Martin Tanner would be Henry Martin Tanner, Arizona pioneer, and add the term pioneer because he was a pioneer. And then that helps us focus the searches on a more specific part of his life or on or associations with other people who may have accompanied him as pioneers to Arizona. Think of what is you want to know and then use the words to form a question. So let's say I want to know where do I find passenger lists, or I want to know about passenger lists. So then I put it into a question. Where are passenger lists? And I put that question into Google. Now, Google isn't necessarily answering your question, but what it is doing is looking for all the words across the internet on billions of websites and associating those words with websites that have those same kind of terms. So you can actually ask a question and then it will seem like it's answering the question because someone else asked the question and it brings up the response to that same question. And what I've learned is that the questions that I ask Google are only very, very rarely unique. It's always something someone else has always asked. So one of the things I use this isn't necessarily directly related to genealogy, but it's a good example, is I get into the situation where I have something that's gone wrong with my computer. Okay, I'm getting some weird error message on my computer. So basically, I just take the error message and turn it into a search term. And then I figure that anybody else who's asked about that will have a comment, and it usually find a way to answer it or how to resolve the issue that's been created. Well, it's the same thing you do with genealogy. You think in terms of what it is you want to know, and then you put it in the form of a question and the associated words that you would use with a question. And then you ask Google, but you're not asking Google. What you're doing is searching millions, billions of other websites to see if those words appear in those websites. And what that does is it forces that information to the front of your search. And the key here is to repeat the searches and refine the searches until you find some results. and I've said this before in other presentations over the years, that research and searching on the internet and with a, you got to be kidding me. That better not be a another fire red alarm, or we're going to be really upset. Okay, well that was weird. Anyway, we'll see what happens. Think of what it is you want to know and then use the words, but repeat your searches until you find some results. Now, searching is a skill. It's a skill, just like riding a bicycle, swimming, learning how to throw a baseball, learning how to type, learning how to, do anything, drive a car, whatever it is, is a skill out there. Sewing, whatever. Basically, it's something you learn through practice and repetition, and that's exactly the way you learn how to do searches on Google. You do it through practice and through repetition. So, just like going to school, getting training, or learning, searching is a learned skill that you actually have to practice at. The more you do it, the more feedback you get from Google, meaning the more searches you have, whether they're successful or not successful, basically helps you to understand what it is you're trying to find. And as you do it, then you get better at it. And it's hard for people to understand that, because they would search and they'd say, well, I just can never find what I want to on Google. And the answer is because you haven't practiced enough. You just have to keep trying. And you have to keep varying the words, and by the way, the order of the words that you use is also important. If I'm looking for Henry Martin Tanner, Arizona Pioneer, and I'm telling Google the name Henry Martin Tanner is more important than Arizona and Pioneer. If I start looking for Pioneer, then I'm going to get a lot of stuff that I don't get if I put Henry Martin Tanner first. And then if I start adding in Arizona, I'm going to get a lot more stuff. And if I finally add Henry Martin Tanner, I may or may not get that document up to the front of the pile of documents that are produced, website references. So just like playing the piano or any other thing, as I just said a moment ago, the more you search, the better you become at searching. So do this all the time. And if you become habitual at surfer like I am, for example, anytime someone asks you a question, you'll pull out your phone and stick it into Google or whatever and come up with the real answer instead of just making stuff up for people. It doesn't really help in your social interactions, by the way. It makes you a very obnoxious type person, so you may want to tone it down a bit, but I'm just kind of leading on to some types of situation. You don't want to be a know-it-all, but in other words, in genealogy, if you're trying to do your own research, you do want to be a know-it-all. You want to know everything you can. Okay, now, here we're going to do a search, and I'm showing an example of a search. This case, we'll do Esther Brownell, clear back in 1706, living in the colony of Rhode Island in British colony of America. And I guess that's the full name of it. And we've got some information on this person. We know this person probably existed. So the first question we have to ask is, what do we know about this person? And then we want to know, what do you want to know about this person? So we do know some things. We know that supposedly she was born in 1706, 10th of February, in Little Compton, Newport County, colony of Rhode Island in British colonial America. So what do we want to know? Let's see what we want to know. There's right here, there's a missing death place. They've got 15 February 1806 in Rhode Island, which is probably a good guess. If she died in Rhode Island, and you'll notice here that she died when she was 100 years old and 5 days. So 5 days after she turned 100 years old. If that's correct, I mean, we just got numbers here. We don't know that that's correct. Okay, so we're going to search for Esther Brownell and put in the extra search term death. You'll notice I have Esther Brownell in quotation marks. So first of all, when we do a search like this, you have to ignore the junk ads for websites. There's a lot of junk that comes up. So you may get all sorts of websites that say things like, find Esther Brownell's phone number, and look for Esther Brownell, Esther Brownell in current places like New York City or places like that. Anyway, those are paid ads, so they're going to come up regardless of what kind of searches you do, and you just kind of have to wade through all that and ignore it. Or if if you're interested and you're trying to sell you something and you want to buy, then you're in there. That's how Google stays in business. So look for websites that could answer that question. So that's the key there. And then check out anything interesting. Um, the interesting here refers to genealogically interesting, not just stuff that comes up as a result of random searching. Uh, One of the difficulties, of course, in using the internet is focusing your attention on exactly what you're trying to find rather than getting distracted into looking at dog videos and cats and babies and going to Facebook and checking your email and doing all the other stuff that has a distraction. So if you're focused on what you're doing and you keep on task, it's kind of like when if you're in school, and the teachers kept telling you to keep on task, keep doing the work rather than staring around the room or just making a disturbance. Well, uh, watching Facebook or looking on YouTube or whatever, other than listening to one of our wonderful videos, is a distraction while you're trying to do genealogical research. And then add or remove search terms. So if it doesn't work, if death doesn't work, then put burial, then put cemetery, then put anything you're associating with that particular topic that you're going to find. Now, the next rule out here is to search for places rather than just constantly searching for names. Searching for names can be productive, but it becomes very unproductive the more research and the deeper into that research that you get. So what I would suggest here is that you begin with places. Actually, I begin with places. When I'm talking to somebody about or trying to help them find something out about their family, then I always begin with the place. It's the most important factor of everything, because all of the records that we have for genealogical research are either organized or originated through a specific place. So basically, we need to know a place that existed at the time that the event occurred in a person's life. But in addition to that, we need to know how it was called at that time and use that as a search term. And we can use Google, and particularly Google Maps, to verify that the place names that we have recorded in our family trees are correct, that they actually pertain to our ancestors. So, for example, when I am working with people on their particular challenges in finding their ancestors, I will routinely run all of the names of all the places through a Google search to make sure and verify that the place existed at the time that the event is recorded, first of all, and secondly, to determine whether or not they've actually created the name properly. This is particularly true. Well, it kind of generally becomes more of a crucial issue as you move into places like Scandinavia. England is particularly, English research, British Isles and Ireland, they're all very, very, very subject to problems and creating what we call brick walls based on the fact that you're searching in the wrong place simply because you don't have the right way it's designated, or because the place didn't really exist in that fashion. I can probably generalize and say that if you've inherited your genealogy from someone who did the work in the past, I mean 20, 30 years ago or further back in time, then there's a fairly high percentage chance that at least some of the place names that are recorded are going to be either out of order or misspelled or just not right, just completely wrong. So this is a very important thing to do to make sure you're not searching in the wrong places. Almost always, particularly with names that aren't totally, aren't very, very unique names, or names that are relatively common, you're going to find that um, even if you're searching in the wrong place, you're going to be able to find people with that name. So Henry Tanner, for example, even Henry Martin Tanner, is not a unique name. It is pretty unique in the United States, and that's why I use it. But if I used Henry Tanner, believe me, there would be tens of thousands of people with that name. So that would not help me if I were searching in the wrong place. The other part of this that's helpful is to use the Google Maps program to see how far places are apart. Now, this becomes crucial the further back in time that you go. So if you go back in time and you're searching as you go back into the early 1800s, into the 1700s, and even before that, um, the general rule is that the further back in time that you go, the less likely it is that the people have moved or move around. There was a study done in England that I've referred to where they looked at the census records and determined that before around 1850, there people who were born and got married and died within 6 miles of each other. So if you were born someplace, chances are you were going to get married and die within 6 miles. That was the average. And that isn't necessarily the case. I was recently doing research in Mexico and in Spanish and Catholic Church parish registers, and found out that this family that I was researching had traveled all over the place in this one big valley, and had their children baptized in lots and lots of different parishes. So it depends on the area, but to the great extent, this going back in time starts to focus people on a specific geographic location. And the answer here to the whole thing is to keep searching. You can't just give up. You have to just keep banging away at the searches. Um, there's a tendency to think that there's some kind of magic wand out there that you can wave and that it'll make life a little easier and that you won't have to keep going back and forth and back and forth. And I redo searches. One of the classic examples was one of my family, ancestral families that came from Ireland. My great-great-grandfather, uh, Samuel Linton, was recorded as being born in one place in Ireland by his daughter. And as dutiful descendants, we continued to look and search on that term for a long time and found out that there was no such place and couldn't even find anything that sounded much like that. We tried all sorts of things. I tried tricks like trying to say it with an Irish accent to see what it might have been sounded like when he said it to his daughter and things like that. But when it came down to was that it was the wrong place and the wrong spelling. And it was because we started looking more and more and continued to search, that I actually found a record that he had created during his lifetime and written down where he had been born. And that turned out to be a real place, and it turned out to be only a mile or two from where his father was born, supposedly born. And it basically solved that mystery. But that took about 15 years of off and on persistent searching to resolve. So it's not something that's going to be resolved very quickly. Okay, well, that runs it out for today. We were almost through, actually, when that lovely um, fire alarm went off last time. And it's too bad we didn't have a few more minutes. Remind everybody that this is a BYU Family History Library webinar and that they are uploaded to our BYU Family History Library YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com and do a search on YouTube for BYU Family History Library, and you'll take you to the Family History Library website, and there we'll have the recorded videos. Thanks for watching.
Okay, thank you very much, James. That was a wonderful presentation. Again, like he said, if you'd like to watch it again or share it with others, go ahead and find the video on YouTube. It will be uploaded later today, and also it'll be available on Facebook. If you didn't get a chance to fill out the polls at the beginning of the webinar, those are now available down below at the bottom of your screen. If you just want to fill those out before you exit, that would be wonderful, and we hope to see you at our next webinar. All right, thanks. Bye.